This production is sponsored by S&J Detailing, the patio and driveway cleaning experts. Quote Super League Raw on quotation for an exclusive discount. S&J Detailing and Super League Raw, washing away the competition.
Because he was a maverick.
He was. He actually, in his book, says that you saved his career. I don't know if you ever read Lee's book, but he does hint at that you were the right coach at the right time for Lee Briers.
David, I sleep very well. I don't need to read Lee's book. He'll like that.
Fair play. No,
but
I have read it. I have read it, and that's what he said.
I'd love to read his book. I've never read it, so yeah, I will.
It's funny. Like Moses, as you said, there's characters in the game. It's warts and all. There's some stuff in there that you wince at, but equally, he does say that you were the right coach at the right time. And I think the interesting thing again, because this is what I love about talking to people like yourself. Again, as you said that in business, in life, there's this old adage: if you give somebody an inch, they'll take the mile. I disagree with that. I think if you give people a mile, they take an inch.
I agree.
I really do. I think what you did there is you put the mirror up and said, you know what, Lee, you're your own man. You're not responsible for Lee Briers outside of Warrington Wolves. I'm not responsible for my kids when they leave for school in the morning. All I can do is encourage their behaviour, give them the right values, the right belief system. If they go out today and steal something from a shop, that's not on me. That's on them. I don't condone it, but that's on them. No. And it's the same in sport. You've given him an option. You put the mirror up, Lee. You're your own man. But this is my take on it.
Absolutely.
And, we're clever people. When we've got people who are talking sense to us, we might not instantly take the advice because, again, we have an inbuilt system to go, who are you to say that to me? We have that inbuilt system. But actually, when we go away and reflect, if the message is right, we often come to the right conclusion, don't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes we just need that person to point something out to us sometimes, to get us to think. And, that was just a nice little story about Lee.
Happy days.
I love coaching him.
Absolutely. Well, look, we missed out Great Britain. I don't want to go to Great Britain. I want to stay on Warrington. But from your perspective, to coach Great Britain, a brilliant accolade for you. The World Cup didn't go the way you'd have wanted, but actually in test matches, decent record in test matches. You gave New Zealand a bloody nose on quite a few occasions, which was probably the highlight of all of that. You won't be the first, you won't be the last to struggle against Australia. But in terms of that whole experience to coach England and to coach Great Britain, if you can summarise that, what did that give you as a coach?
It was a great honour. And I enjoyed working with the elite players, of the game. It was an honour to work with them, and I learnt loads about it. What I really struggled with was not coaching regularly. 4 games a year at the end of the year. I really struggled with it. I just, it wasn't enough. It wasn't fulfilling enough for me. And to get them together, and it was at a point in time where there were 2 powerhouses, Leeds and St. Helens, and they were, beating each other in the grand finals. Around that sort of time, there was a bit of rivalry and different approaches to how to come together as a team. One wanted to make huge sacrifices. The other one wanted to bond and do the bonding stuff, So, it was an interesting facet of time. But I think I would have been a better coach if I was club coach and national coach. But they wouldn't let me do it. It was a full-time position. A couple of years later, they let a couple of other coaches do it. And it's crazy not to, because when you're out of your art and performing in your art, you're not as good, you're not as sharp, you're not as on it. And that's how I felt. That's how I felt. And that's ultimately why I left it. And my other bit, the World Cup wasn't great. Back in those times, and it's still the case, we were 3 or 4 in the world, and that's where we are now. It's just, what we now have is more players playing in the NRL that are British, which then sharpens them to a new level. So this is why we're able to compete more now. It's a bit like the girls on the ladies last weekend. Honestly, that's kind of how it was back then. It was, we're on different spheres, whereas now there's some of the men are playing over there and learning and coming back here and passing that on as well. So, and that's what needs to happen with the ladies. Some of the ladies need to go and play in the elite competition, and that'll raise our levels here and they'll be able to compete better. But, the 2008, I think it was 2008 World Cup. Yeah, it didn't go well, but it's probably where we were. It would have been hard to get much more out of us then. I think we had one player in the team, Mozza, who had played in the NRL before that. After that, bang, Gareth Ellis, Sam Tompkins, Sam Burgess, James Graham, they all started to go over there and get experience in what is a tougher competition, more even competition. So it's able to sharpen their skills and their prowess and bring that back to the national team. I would have loved to have got hold of him a few years later.
Well, do you know what? Again, we said that we go off on tangents. You've gone there, so let's go there. Should the Gillaroos England ever have been on that bill? Because I saw that coming a mile away. Probably not 90, but I saw it coming a mile away. And then after the game, we're talking about heritage Australians coming over. There's a big, last night they plugged the bench with Jenna and John. They're going to be talking about the women's game and the state of the women's game over here. We didn't need that game in Vegas to know where the women's game was over here. And I fear here that the rug is about to get pulled. And I hope that's not the case.
Me too.
Because at the end of the day, we're not, again, we talk about growth, we talk about progress. We should not be judging the women's team on the Australian team. We're a million miles behind them. It's about, as you say, the incremental gains. How do we achieve that? How do we get more of our elite women's players over in the NRL that then bring back their experience that improves the British game? And then we go, it's probably a 10, 15-year project. And the question now, Tony, is have we got the appetite for it? Your take on that, on what I've just said. What's your view?
If they wanted to showcase the ladies' game, it should have been State of Origin, New South Wales versus Queensland. That would have been an entertaining game to put on, but also showcase the ladies' game because of the evenness of those two teams. And listen, I don't think that was very well thought through to have England and Australia, which is a real shame because it's horrible hearing some of the flack that the ladies have copped since then. And it wasn't their fault. It's not their fault. The only fault they've got is that they turned up and, because somebody said they would and they should, they went there and tried their best, but they're just on different levels at the moment because of the progress that has been made in women's sport and ladies rugby league in Australia. Our ladies here should not cop anything about that. Other people should be putting their hand up and taking responsibility and taking all the weight off those ladies because it's not been right. But, the solution would have been to put on a showcase game of ladies rugby league. And I think that's positive.
Spot on. Right, let's get back to because again, it leads nicely in. You said about Moz. Of course, you inherited Moz. You get to Warrington and you've got a genuine rugby league. I'll say superstar. I mean, Moz, he's a lad. He's a character. We know he is. But what he did in Australia paved the way. It absolutely paved the way. Suddenly, us Poms deserved and demanded respect through Adrian Morley. And of course, you got him out of the Warrington Wars, and I'm sure he was an integral part to not only the performances and the wins that Warrington got and the trophies, but also, in terms of what you were doing as well. I can imagine Moz on the field was very, very much aligned to your way of thinking. 2010, you get to Warrington in 2010, 2009, and you bring the first Challenge Cup to Warrington for many a year. Again, very similar to Leeds, baptism of fire. Dare I say, you go back to back in your first two seasons. Lovely stuff. When you got to Warrington, because I know it intimately, What were your first impressions? I mean, there's a lot of rumour as to what Tony Smith did in Warrington when you first arrived. How many of those are true or not? We hear of people turning up late for buses and being told to go home, whether that's true or not. We hear players coming into offices saying, I deserve to be in this team. And you say, well, why do you deserve to be in this team? And very soon they leave the club. I don't know how much of this is folklore, how much of this is true, but go on, so just talk us through, because there's no doubt you changed the culture of Warrington. There's no doubt. Everybody at Warrington knows that. You know, you had an integral part of changing the direction of Warrington from an also-ran squad, littered with, they always spent money, but it wasn't that professionalism, that culture wasn't there. There was a shift when you arrived. What did you do? What was your initial impression, and what did you do to make them Challenge Cup winners 3 years out of 4?
I talked to them, got to know them pretty quick as best I could. This is same wherever I go, try to get to know the characters within the team and try to observe as much as I can and get a feel for the culture. And, we make assumptions from outside, and I did too about them, but I had to get to know from the inside, and I needed to spend time with them and get to know what their issues were. But, can I say to you, my first time I spoke to them was at Wilderspool, and we were training there, and it was in a complete dump. We were in the bar area, and each footstep, you nearly lost your trainer because it was stuck to the floor. And we're sitting on bar stools. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. And I'd come from, Leeds Rhinos, where we had a great training facility, and it just wasn't professional. And I could feel for the players, and I could feel a bit of their grief too. We wanted them to be professional, but we were in that sort of environment also. So it wasn't just about getting the players to be more professional. We had to become, and we had to lead that way. And so some things had to change, and they did. Fortunately, the people, I was very well supported by Simon in particular. He was unreal during my time there, and great to work for, and very supportive of what we were trying to do. But the other thing, the Aussie boys, Monners, Michael Monahan, Kingy, and Hicksy, Chris Hicks, and the Vinny was the Kiwi, Vinny Anderson. And honestly, I recognised myself in them. They just were complaining about everything, the weather, everything was just not as good as where they've come from. So, and I recognise that from my time in Workington, and I was that player, and they thought Wilderspool was bad. Oh, they needed to go to Workington, but I got it. I understood it. And I can remember sitting down having a conversation with them, and I just said to them, each one of them, Paul Rahihi was part of that as well. And I just said, listen, boys, if you're not happy here and you don't think you can be happy here, just go home. I'll get it done. I'll get it done for you. You either embrace it, it is what it is, and we make the best of it, but we're not going to keep walking around ripping each other apart and tearing each other, making each other feel down about things. So you need to go home and have a real good talk to your partners, your wives, your families. But if any of you want to go, you can. I'll make it happen for you. They all come back. It was a bit like the Lee Briers. They come back a bit quicker, but they all come back and that, no, we're in. And that helped. That helped. I can also say to you, the first time I spoke to the whole group, I said to them, listen, new coach here, I'm going to say something to you. This club is going to be successful. Whether you're still here, and part of that is up to you. But we are going to be successful. This club is going to be successful. So gave them a choice, you know, and I think that encouraged them to buy in. Not everybody did immediately, but you know, I went as far as to say it's going to be successful. It's either going to be down to you being here, or it's going to be down to you not being here when it is successful. And it made a whole lot of them think. Now, a few of them fell away as we went, and probably helped. But you know, most of them bought in. What I think had happened, David, I think it gave them hope as a group. I think it gave them a bit of inspiration to change, and that if they did change, some good things might happen. So, you know, I wasn't laying down the law. I was giving them hope to make something of themselves with this team and with this group. And did you want to be part of it? You know, we all have choices, you know, and you can choose to be successful, or you can choose to become not so successful. And it's down to your attitude, you know, and that's just what I was able to help them with, you know. And so some of the folklores, I'll let those keep going.
Maybe you'll tell me discreetly and in confidence later. But anyway, but there are a lot of folklore that goes around there. There is a lot of folklore that goes around there, and you know, it was unprecedented. You know, in terms of, you know, the younger generation never had it so good. For those who had done the hard time at Wilderspool, you know, this was a complete and utter breath of fresh air, and that team was littered with quality. I mean, it really was. I mean, you know, we talk about most, but Gaz Carvel was an animal. You know, David Solomona was, I mean, has there ever been a prop forward with as good a hands as David Solomona? I mean, that man with a rugby ball was incredible. Louis Anderson and Benny Westwood second row. I mean, Louis Anderson was a machine, and he was in tears when he left the club. He didn't want to leave the club. I know that salary cap got involved in that, but you know, Louis Anderson was a tremendous player. Benny Westwood, terrible trainer, brilliant on the field at the weekend, as we all know. I mean, the one that got away was Wigan. I mean, your biggest regret, and you've said this when we had a conversation earlier in the week, your biggest regret was not taking a grand final because you had the team to do it, didn't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You know, we didn't in the end, but you know, I thought we were good enough to do it, and on that occasion we weren't, and unfortunately, but yeah, I would have loved to have been involved in the first grand final win for Warrington in Super League. You know, that would have been great to be part of. We gave it a shake a couple of times, but yeah, that Wigan game was the big one where I thought we were controlling that game until Joel Monaghan got injured, and you know, just the effect of that injury had on the rest of the team and his brother. You know, having a brother in the team.
Yeah.
You know, I think they were all gutted for him because he was such a big character within our team as well. So yeah, but these are the tests. This is what makes it, you know, grand. The final,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the tests. But some of the names you've just mentioned there, I don't know whether you're going to ask me about my top 13 or top 17.
We will be. We will be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Some will be in there, will they?
Yeah, a couple of
Possibly.
names
Right.
you've
I will.
mentioned. I've just looked
We'll
at the
get
list.
in. We'll get into that in a sec. Before we move off Warrington, because obviously, you know, a lot of great personalities there. We talked about Lee. There's two. We didn't talk about Kev Sinfield. Just it's simply let's just quickly nail Kev Sinfield. Probably one of the best game managers in the Super League era. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that the reason that Leeds were as successful as they were was he was big. He was a big game player. He knew how to manage a final incredibly well. He should be knighted. He should be. He should be knighted. You know him. You speak to him. Just give a tribute to the player, to the man, because you know you're privileged in the fact that you know this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what you see him doing, that's him. There's nothing. There's no pretense about him. He's just that's him. He's a thoughtful young man. He was a young captain. I think he was 22 or 23 when I got there, and he just he was able to get leadership from those around him as well. You know, he was in amongst a team that we had ex-international kangaroos in our team, David Ferner and
Yeah,
Matt Adamson and all these, you know, and Kevin was able to lead alongside of them, you know, and encourage them to lead as well. He just didn't see himself any more special than anybody else, which I loved. It's a great ability to have as a leader, and encourage those people to lead in areas that he hadn't experienced yet. And you know, he gained that experience from those guys, and then went on to become a senior part of that team years later. But yeah, he just, you know, a thorough professional on a personal level for himself. You know, he'd be the last one to finish training. He's always there, the earliest, and playing mucking around with, you know, Rob Burrow and playing pranks on each other. But the kindest natured person you could ever have in your team, but a great leader with it. I I've always said this: if I had to build a club team around, and I could start with any player that I've ever coached, Kevin Sinfield would be number one pick as, you know, leader of that team. When I got to England, I had him in my squad at one point. The hardest thing I ever had to do as a coach was I made a decision not to pick him at one point and left him out of a squad. And I can sincerely say it was the hardest decision I ever had to make as a coach, because I had that much respect for the man. I felt there was somebody else and other people in his position that were more appropriate at international level, and that's what I said to him. But I heard him, you know, and it did hurt. It hurt me to tell him, but I had to do what I thought was right. But I'd also say to you, if I was to pick a team and a club team, he'd be the first person I'd pick for sure.
spoiler alert for what's coming next. But let's now quickly go to Briers. So he said it, not me. You've not read the book. He does intimate that you changed his career, and now he's a coach. One, did you see that when you first met him? Two, Wigan, Brisbane, and already Saints. I mean, you know, big game against as we record on this, Saints play KR tonight. The Lee Briers effect as an attacking coach. One, what's your thoughts on Lee, the coach? Did you see it when you first met him? What are you making of him so far? And do you see him as a future head coach?
Yeah, yes on all of that. And yes, with a proviso a little bit on
He doesn't go to drink on a Sunday.
And that's okay too. And you can do that if you're a coach sometimes too, not on a Sunday. But yes, for a lot of those reasons, if he gained enough discipline in his personal life and made a few sacrifices, yes, I could always see him, because he's good with people, terrific at reading games, terrific. He could read things on the field way better than I ever did as a player, and also as a coach. You know, I learnt so much. There was another one in our team at that time, Michael Monaghan, who was exceptional reader of the game. We had two exceptional readers and see things that just other people don't see, you know. But Lee's one of those, and he'd read the moments and the opportunities, and you know, it's really hard to coach that. Coaches can learn from that, and that's what I did. I learnt from them and allowed them to explain some of those situations, but do some of their own things. You know, go on a hunch, go on a whim sometimes, and take a risk. It mightn't be the percentage thing to do, but back yourself. And Lee was very, very good at that. So no, it doesn't surprise me. He's good with people. He's good with, you know, being understanding, and you know, he's been a bit of a a lad as well, which probably helps as well, because anybody who, tries to pull the wool over his eyes, he's already done it, like he, he's taken a few shortcuts in his career, so he gets it. He knows when somebody's not, doing the right things everywhere, so that'll help him and hold him in good stead.
Fantastic stuff. Well, look, we're going to quickly have a little chat about Hull, and then we're going to get into you 1 to 13. The two Hulls. I mean, that's an accolade, isn't it? The two Hulls back to back. Wow. I shouldn't say that, should I? The KR and Hull. But on behalf of the people who are watching this, whether they're part of Super League Raw or not, I think on behalf of Leeds fans and on behalf of Warrington fans, certainly thank you for the time that you gave to our clubs, for the impact that you made, and of course for the success that you brought. I think that they would want me to say that, so I have done. We now go to Hull KR, Project Hull KR. Brilliant. I mean, there was a book made on it. I mean, you talk about a club that, I mean, Lee have done it, Hull KR have done it, Wakey are now doing it, where they come up from the Championship and they revolutionised themselves. Because you were a big part of that in terms of that initial, the change, the mentality, the culture, the marketing, all that things that KR have done to get him to that point. Took over from Tim Sheens, of course. You actually knocked out Warrington as well, of all teams in the playoffs. What was all that about? But yeah, Project KR. Looking back on that now, your thoughts on your time at KR?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was. It wasn't easy to start with, and the resources weren't as abundant as they are now. We had to make do and get the best out of what we had at that point in time and what was available to us. So it was tough. It was tough to start with, but I'll tell you, and there's an affinity between the team and the supporters at Warrington, similar. And I know before I got there, it wasn't always. There was a bit of, the guys on the field and the speckies, the supporters weren't always connected, but they managed to do that, and they've got a really good connection. At Hull KR, they've got a really strong connection with their team. Their expectations of their team, up until that may start changing now, but they didn't have high expectations of their team as long as they went out and had a crack, and had a good dig at it. So there was a real good, strong connection between the team and the supporters. And I think it's really important that you do. I really do. I think it makes it easier for everybody involved. And to have real success, you need to be all connected up, throughout the club, but also with your support as well, and be connected. And they were really strong like that. So even the hard days at Hull KR, the supporters were right behind the team, and they could see things getting better, and that helped things get better. So that was a really interesting time. Yeah, it was hard work to start with, but they were good people, really good people. One of the biggest factors during my brief time at Hull KR was Sean Kenny Dow. I'm going to put him in that category of Kevin Sinfield leadership. If I do get asked about my ultimate team, I'd have them as co-captains. That's how high up I regard Skids or Sean Kenny Dow. Amazing person, amazing leader, good, just great captain, and a big influence. So he certainly made my time easier there and made it easier for us to make progress. So yeah, I enjoyed my time at Hull KR. That was good fun. It was a bit of a different project, but yeah, it was good. Unfortunately, it sort of ended a bit sooner than I would have liked, but that was more down to some personalities from above And it's the first time I've really had that throughout my career, where I couldn't work with somebody that I didn't trust. And that's a value that I stick by.
Well, we were asked by a OKR fan as to why you left, and I think you've just answered that. Bazza Kingston, one of our followers and members, asked that question. You then, of course, leave there prematurely for that reason, and then you decide, I've got to say, Tony, respect, you then decide that your next project is going to be across the city, which, that takes some doing. And again, that was a project that was a big one, didn't last long. Summarise that, what attracted you to it, and ultimately what made you leave?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things about it. Brian Smith coached there in 1989. So that was part of it, the fact, and I think there was a bit of an acceptance from the black and whites of me because of the Brian Smith connection, of some of the older brigade that supported him. So it made the transition a bit more palatable, if you like, for some of the supporters. And yeah, that was part of it. I was also still living in Hull at the time when Adam Pearson approached me, and so it was a bit of, well, I'm here, and it's a big project, and I love projects. I like when they're difficult, and probably didn't realise just how difficult it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be big because I'd sensed the culture there, and it takes time to turn that around. And I was quite prepared for that. The problem, I think, one of the problems that we had was, once again, resources. In terms of, there's been an influx, and you talked about a few clubs there. You just mentioned about KR, Wakefield. Who was the other ones?
Lee.
Resources are, there's an influx of resources, which makes it easier. Doesn't guarantee success, but it makes it more likely. My owner wasn't in a position to be throwing that sort of money in to attract the kind of players we probably needed. So it was a bit of a consolidation period of time where we were trying to bring our young guys through, try to buy some bargains and take some risk on some players that probably weren't, quite right for the fit, but we couldn't afford the others. We couldn't afford to go after a Warira Hargreaves or a Peter Hiku. We weren't in that sort of position to do that. So it was going to be a long project, but then change of ownership come along, and I was quite okay with that. I was quite okay. I understood the owner's situation, and I also realised that I wasn't going to be able to work for the new management team. It wasn't going to be the right fit. It wasn't going to be a case of, total respect either way. So that's important. That's important. So I was quite okay. Listen, I was quite okay to finish. I would have loved to have seen the project through and have some more resources. I'm not excuse making here. It was what it was, and we were poor at long periods of time there, and it's probably the most challenging of cultures that I've had to deal with. I would have loved to have seen that through and see if it could be changed, and hopefully they are changing it now, because there's a lot of very, very, very good people in Hull FC, and I want their fortunes to change, and hopefully they'll get there. But it just wasn't going to be for me under the changes.
I hinted at that at the time, and it's interesting. And without naming names, I thought as much. There's just something not right about that in terms. I couldn't see you.
No,
I couldn't see you with that line management. I just couldn't see it.
No, that's right. That's right. Absolutely, you're spot on there, David. Without going into it, it wouldn't have been a chemistry that would have worked. And we're not. I'm not suited for every job, and I'm not suited for every situation, and not every job suits me either.
No. Yeah.
So, but I managed to get a few that suited me pretty well, and that I was able to have some impact in, and I'm very, very grateful for those opportunities. But I'm, I loved my coaching at each one of those places, and I really sincerely mean that, and I love coaching. That's what I'm still doing. I'm just not doing it in rugby league, and I get
No.
just as much buzz out of coaching other individuals nowadays. Really do, as much as I did in rugby league as well.
Fair play. Fair play to you. No, brilliant stuff. Couple of final questions, and then we'll do you on to 13
Sure.
because we've had some members. When we told the members that you were coming on, we got a few questions, so I'll upset them if I don't ask you them. We've already dealt with Bazzers. Carla Collier, a Lee Leopards fan, she said, have you ever been offered a role in to coach a team that you've turned down, and in hindsight, wouldn't have minded to have a crack at it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anywhere where I've. Yeah. There's not very. It's not very often that you get to take over somewhere that's really good. There's usually a dysfunction at most places that you start. Leeds Rhinos was the closest to being, pretty well set up, ready to go, but there was still some dysfunctions about that. Yeah, and just the culture not quite right, and they need some tweaking. But no, listen. I like even the basket case that it was the Huddersfield Giants when I first took over, because they come last for the previous 3 seasons as well. I like all those. I like those challenges. I like that turning it around, and we only if you're given time to do that. None
Yeah.
of those are overnight successes. It just depends. But no, the answer is no. There's nowhere that I've been offered and gone, well, actually, no, I can't do that or don't want to. There's been a couple that I just mentioned that I've opted out of and wanted to for reasons that are really, really strong for me. I've got to have faith in the people around me, both above and below, for me to be able to do my job well, and to encourage people to do their job well. So that's really important.
Fantastic. That leads into another question that came in from Mark Hill, a Leeds Rhino fan. You talked there about taking on a project and being given time. Rowan, your nephew, was he given enough time at Leeds? What did you make of his departure?
Yeah, he's a good young coach. He's a good young coach. Whether well, ultimately he wasn't quite the right fit there in the end. I think he did some good things there. Was he given enough time? I'm not sure. Don't think so, probably. But that's probably a little bit of bias. You know, I know how good a person he is and how good a coach he is. Um, you know, did everything gel there for him? Probably not. Um, was he given? Was he given long enough? I don't know all the ins and outs. Love him to bits, and I didn't delve into too much of that. I'd support him where I could, and he'd support me where he could. But he was his own man, and he will live and die by his own decisions. And he knows that, and yeah, he's very happy. He's gone back to Brisbane North, and a place where he had success from with before, and I'm sure he will again. And sometimes things just don't work out and have a happy ending or a fairy tale ending. But he's honestly he's quite proud of his time there, and also very fond memories and of the people that he worked with there.
Well, look, he's young enough to come back, and like Darryl Powell, Project Warrington didn't work out, gone to Wakey, and back comes Darryl. Maybe his time will come again. He's certainly young enough. Yeah. The most underrated player that you've ever coached? Most underrated player. So from the outside, underrated, but you knew what you had. Who would that be?
Oh wow.
That's Billy Ingram, another Leeds fan that's asked that.
Underrated. Oh, there's plenty of them. I'll tell you, I underrated them. I had a few of them that I underrated until there's lots of them. We make judgments on them until you then get to work with them. I underrated Willie Poaching when I coached against him. I saw his faults, leading up to coaching him. Then working with him, wow, I loved working with him, and I saw and understood just what he did for the team and how good he was. And Andrew Doonerman was another one of those to, pick out a couple from Leeds Rhinos. I thought Dooners was an average player before I coached him. I loved him, and he I learnt to understand him and appreciate what they do sometimes even off the field and in training and on the rest of the squad. I've had so many of those, but they're just a couple to make mention.
Fair enough. Fantastic. And then the last question, you'll be pleased to know, and then we'll do you on to 13 and you'll be off into the sunset. If you were in the prominent role of the Rugby Football League, not that you probably want it, but if you were in a prominent role now in the Rugby Football League, the Vegas, the marketing, IMG, all of that kind of stuff, what would Tony Smith do? What would be the first thing that you would do that you believe would elevate our game to where it needs to be? What would be the first thing that you would suggest, would you say? Best sport in the world, deserves a platform. We need to get there.
Yeah.
What will be a good step forward?
Yeah, just bring everybody together and get united and have a decent plan together. That's, I don't think we're good at that. And, and then we don't promote ourselves because of that. How we promote ourselves hasn't been great. But how can you do that when you're not all united? To be something special, or to have a team that's highly successful, and we're a team all together. The whole rugby league. We can't agree on too many things for too long. We don't thrash it out. We don't get enough opinions. We don't get a cross section of opinions. We just make frivolous decisions too often, or listen to one sector and make our decisions without getting a complete cross section. That's the blueprint's been there for years and years and years. And I'm not saying because of my accent and my heritage where I come from that everything's great in Australia, but for years and years they've been getting together and getting a cross section of players, fans, coaches, administrators, marketers, and get them all in the same room. We can't do that. We never do that. We never get the chief executives, coaches, and owners and representative for players in the same room. We never do. The closest we've got to it is on a couple of occasions, referees, coaches, and players in the same room. But we can't get all the stakeholders in the same room to come up with some consensus, opinions, have some good debate and good arguments, and then walk out of a room and go, right, we're all on this together. We can't do it. It's been there for years. 20 years ago, I'd say, the NRL started doing some of that. And, I know it's a big sport in Australia, but it means when you're not a big sport, like we're not in this country, it means you've got to be even tighter. We're not. We're the complete opposite, and it's part of my frustration and has been for many, many years. The way that we're run, rather than, there's individual clubs that are very, very well run, and run good businesses here, but we can't unite and make each other stronger. And that's just, I'm not sure who's going to do it for them and when it's ever going to be done, or whether it's just too far gone. I'm not sure, David. I don't like to be pessimistic. I like to be optimistic, but it's certainly going to take some doing.
You're spot on. NFL, NRL, they do it. They do what's good for that badge first and foremost, not their individual badge. And by doing that and by by making that bigger and better. That's where the merchandise, that's where the marketing, that's where the investment comes in. It's all well and good Wigan, perhaps, and no disrespect to Saints and Leeds, but at this moment in time, Wigan, perhaps the best run club in British Rugby League. They can't be a full-time team if there's no Super League to play in. And this is where you're spot on. We need to come at this as Super League, the brand. What do we do collectively? And then within that, it's for you to be the best of within that. But we all do what's right for the brand. So couldn't agree with you more. Coaching, Tony, ever see you coaching rugby league again, or are you now corporate world and happy doing that?
I'm happy doing that. Listen, I love coaching whatever. I love it. And I love rugby league. I'm not after a job, and my family, probably more than anything, keeps saying to me, don't ever do that again. And I've got some people in business who go, listen, don't go back into sport. And I love coaching. I'm not, I would say I'm done in terms of coaching, in rugby league. As long as I can keep coaching in various ways, I still get my fulfillment. It's what I need to do. I need to coach people and learn myself. And so I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I like coaching to people and with people. So I like doing some of that mentoring as well, and I do that in various sports at the moment. So it's good. Life's good.
Well, if we don't overtly see Tony in rugby league circles in terms of in dugouts, I know you do the odd spot on the TV, and I'm sure you'll continue to mentor and give talks behind the scenes. There's no doubt about it, Tony. Before we do your 1 to 13, there is no doubt about it whatsoever. You have brought a lot of good success to a lot of teams. You are, whether you like it or not, perhaps one of the most successful Super League coaches of currently. Of course, that's there to be knocked down by others, but you stand there shoulder to shoulder with some of the big hitters, and you brought a lot of smiles to a lot of faces. And there's no greater thing in life than to be able to bring joy and happiness to many fans. You've done that. So, on behalf of the entire sport of rugby league, thank you for your service to the game. I know it'll continue behind the scenes, but it's been an absolute privilege, your journey and what you've brought. And I know that players as well would probably echo that you've touched along the way. Right, let's get into this 1 to 13 and then we'll finish. Who's your fullback and why?
No, I'm not doing 1 to 13. I'm doing 1 to 17, David.
You're doing 1 to 17. So we're not actually having a proper team.
No, it's a proper team. I haven't got an 18th man. I'd like to, but
and a kit man. Carry on.
Oh God, it was so hard to narrow it down to 13. I honestly, it's so hard to narrow it down to 17. I'm going to go with Sam Tompkins. I love Sam. I loved him as a young player. As soon as I saw him, and I gave him his first cap for England, and I just thought he was something special, and I loved his. He's just different. I didn't like all his antics all throughout his career. There was times where Sam would frustrate me because he didn't need to do some of those things. He was that good, but he didn't need to do some of the other stuff. But he's a good fella too.
Are you suggesting he should have been sent off in a grand final? Anyway, let's not go there. Let's move on.
No, I do like him, and I love watching him. Joel Monahan, we mentioned Joel earlier. Joel's one of my wingers. I loved him. What a character in the changing room. He was one of the funniest guys. He was up there. He'd make us laugh and smile, and big character. But what a finisher, and some of what he was able to do as a winger. And he was one of those people who, could reach around and put the ball down, and started all the wingers being very athletic. Here you go.
145 tries and 145 appearances for Warrington, Tony.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Do you want the other winger, or do you want to?
Yeah. We'll have the other winger. Who's the other one?
I'm going to go another one from Matt King. Made the wing for me, Kingy. I could have put him in the centres, but I didn't. I had to fit him in somewhere else. But Kingy, Yeah, loved Kingy. He was something special also. Real wholesome guy. Everybody loved him. Lovely nature, but terrific football rugby player. Loved him. So that leaves my two centres. I'm going with another Warrington person, and I'm not loading this because of your connection there over at Warrington, but I'm going to go with Ryan Atkins in the centres. And I'll tell you for why. I coached him for a long time, and I just watched him develop in all sorts of ways, as a player and as a man. And he won't mind me saying this. Ryan's bit different character, and and I just watched him mature as a person, and I loved watching that journey with him, and maybe being a part of that, a little bit of that as well in his development. But I'm also going to bring it back to the rugby side of it. I've never seen anybody able to play the ball quicker than him. He was unbelievable, and in some of what he's. I picked up on some of his technique and started to coach it after coaching Ryan because he shared some of it. But terrific play the ball, and also just his strength and pace and ability to make himself available and make the ball available. He'd make errors, but I loved that he kept trying and kept doing stuff, and loved watching his development. So Ryan's in one centre. Sean Kenny Dow is the other centre for mine. I mentioned him earlier. I'd have him as co-captain in my team. What a great person. And lucky to call him a friend. My number 6, we've already spoken about him at length as well. It sounds like a Warrington team almost. Actually, Sam Tompkins was a Warrington boy, wasn't he, originally?
He supported Warrington as a kid.
That's right.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
Lee Briers for number 6 for me.
Yeah.
For all the reasons we stated before.
Yeah.
Number 7, Rob Burrow, for all the reasons we stated before, and plenty more. Number 8, Adrian Morley, Mozza.
Has to be,
lead by example. He was a great captain by doing it and just being positive. He's a positive person. He didn't have to say much. He just was positive. It was never negative. I love that about Moz.
Never seen biceps like it.
He was good. My number 9. I'm split. I had to put a 9 on the bench. Michael Monaghan, for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, could read the game, see the game, understood the game. Bit miserable at the times, Monas. Monas. He was one of the boys that I said could go home if he didn't like it. He pondered on that for a while, but I'm glad he stayed. He was terrific. Here's one of my other prop, Big Sam Burgess. I mentioned him earlier. He's right up there in some of my best evers. Sam would be number 11, Super Benny Westwood. Super Benny Westwood. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. I went over to the game against Catalan, and I probably had 20 minutes of it. I had 20 minutes of listening to Benny Westwood. Terrific. Horrible trainer, as you mentioned, but do it on the field. Put his body on the line and go above and beyond, Benny, and come up with some remarkable stuff when it was needed. Could rely on him. Gareth Ellis had Gaz at Leeds and England, and then got to work with him briefly at FC. A great man and a great player. Loved watching him play. He was something special. And then Kevin Sinfield, co-captain. Not a bad 13, that.
I mean, if you could put that 13 on the field, I mean, that would take on the NRL. That team would take on the NRL.
Wait until the bench comes. The interchange. James Roby.
Oof,
One of the best. One of the best I've ever seen. Honestly, he was so good. That's why I really struggled with Monners and him. You know, I didn't know which one to, because I think they're both very special for different reasons. But Robes is one of the best I've seen in Super League.
Depends who you're playing, Tony. You're probably in the odd game Roby would start and Monners would come off the bench and vice versa. So we'll just leave that in the ether. It depends who you're playing.
Wouldn't that be a luxury? Jamie Peacock, another great leader, off the bench.
Monaghan, Burgess, and Peacock in the same team.
Wow, wow, yeah. There's some grunt there, isn't there? I haven't finished yet. Once again, one of the best players I've seen in Super League in my time, Sean O'Loughlin.
Yeah.
Sean O'Loughlin. Well, there wasn't much he couldn't do. You know, I struggled for him not to be in my 13. That's why I needed 17. And I'm going to finish with somebody you mentioned earlier. I absolutely love this man as a person and as a player because of his creativity and just the ability that he had. David Solomona. Oh, man. I loved watching him. I loved that he could create things that nobody else could do. I loved being able to coach a player that could do that. You know, put Lee Briers and David Solomona in the same team, you know, that could create things, not just grind things out and grind out a win. You know, like they did have the ability to do that, but probably didn't want to do it that way. That's my idea of rugby league as well, not just grinding games out. It was, can you create something that the other team can't cope with? And I think we do all right, that team.
Love Dancing Dave. Dancing David Solomona. What a player he was. Like I say, hands for a big man, big unit. His offload was incredible. Incredible.
You guys didn't get to see all of it. He'd do stuff in training that we'd all just look at each other and go, really? He was, honestly, when we played touch rugby and do things, Ali Lautiti had some of that as well. He could do some special things. That's, you know, I'm hoping that we're not coaching that out of people anymore.
Well, Herman SA still got the art. I thought he was exceptional for FC last year. He's of that mould. He had a good game last night as well.
Well, he's related. He's the nephew of Ali Lautiti. So he might be in the genes, but you know, we're just got to be careful in professional sport. Sometimes we coach some of that out of people in order to win games. We become coaches not to lose rather than coaches that take a chance to win. And we've got to be careful with that within our sport too. That's where the rule makers need to stay ahead of the coaches, because coaches will coach to the percentages. The rule makers need to keep ahead of them and go, we need to keep our game exciting. So
it's what we pay to see. It's what we pay to see. Who was your 18th man?
David Kane, I think it was. That's my fantasy team.
Oh, there will be a fantasy team now. So, you know what? I could only thank you for the time that you're giving me. I could talk to you. Look, I could talk to you all day. You know, we're not going to do that. Incredible, absolutely incredible. I know that the people who've watched this will have loved every minute of it. On behalf of everybody watching, we wish you nothing but the very best of success, health, and happiness as well. Listen to what the wife says. You know, she's seeing more of you now, so be good. Be coached for a change, as opposed to be coaching others, is what I would say. But stick around, we'll have a quick 2 minutes before we go. But ladies and gentlemen, what a privilege it has been to have Tony Smith with us for the best part of nearly on 2 hours. Outstanding stuff. Great stuff. Who's going to be next? Keep it Super League Raw. We will have another in conversation soon. Tony, thank you very much again. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.